The most recent NIBA Convention was firmly focused on helping brokers prepare for the industry's future, and that means dealing with the disruption caused by digital technology. Keynote speaker Rachel Botsman is one of the globe's leading thinkers on how the internet is reshaping business and commerce, and she gave brokers some meaty food for thought.
What I'm going to explore with you today is how all these ideas are connected. And they're connected by the fact that technology, in some shape or form, has enabled people to directly exchange, connect, share, collaborate. And in doing so, it's enabling them to bypass many traditional intermediaries and industries and processes and people. So, I'd like to start with an example that really was sort of the godfather of this shift in the dynamics of supply and demand. And this is a company that you've probably all heard of called eBay. So did anyone collect Pez dispensers when they were a child? Do you remember they were those candy things that popped out? So the story of eBay, the myth of the story of eBay is that Pierre Amidier helped his girlfriend, started eBay to help his girlfriend buy and sell Pez dispensers that she was obsessed with. Now, this actually wasn't true. It was a myth made up by their PR department. And the reason why they made it up was because the true story they felt was a little bit geeky. The true story went like this, that Pierre decided as an experiment to really understand the network effects of the web, that he would post this broken laser pointer up for auction on his website to see if he would receive any bids. And even he was surprised that within 24 hours, he received a bid for $13.83. So he wrote to the guy and he said, "You do realize that this laser pointer is broken?" And the guy wrote back and said, "I'm a collector of broken laser pointers." Now, this is a dead true story. You can look at the history of eBay. And the reason why I think it's such a powerful anecdote, it's one of those things that started to help me see the role technology was playing in transforming the relationship between two people in a marketplace. So when you strip it down, what you see happening is technology creates two things. The first thing is efficiency. So all of a sudden, it collapses the transaction costs and makes it highly efficient for buyers and sellers, providers and customers, borrowers and lenders to interact and directly sell to one another, cutting out many middlemen. The second thing that it does is it creates trust. It creates a trust to form between strangers in ways on a scale that's never been possible before. And the mistake I see many companies make is they focus on the efficiency piece. But it's the trust piece that's really interesting because it's that human being that used to be in between that we needed to trust. And now what's happening is that strangers are getting more and more comfortable to trust one another directly. So what I want to do today is to explore this idea and to really look at three things. So why has the role of intermediaries changed, and why has it changed so fast? What areas is disruption likely? And the last thing is, how can you adapt and reinvent? So if this situation is a reality, how do you adapt today to succeed tomorrow? So let me give you another example in local services. So think about lots of things that you need doing in your own lives, whether that's fixing a garage or doing some gardening. It's actually quite complicated to organize those logistics. So now what we're seeing is all these direct service marketplaces. So this is one of my favorite. It's called TaskRabbit. And the reason why I'm showing you a picture of a dog is that Kobe is, in fact, the inspiration for this multi-million-dollar startup called TaskRabbit. Now, what happened was Leah Buskey, the founder here, she was living in Boston. It was a freezing cold night, and she was waiting with her husband to take her out for dinner when Kobe came up to them and he started barking. And they both realized that they had run out of dog food. And they got in a fight over who should have arranged to pick up the dog food. Now, it was in this moment they started to realize, they were both programmers at IBM, that there had to have been someone in the pet store at that moment who was willing to run the errand for them. So they started thinking about this concept called service networking. And this is going to become fundamentally important to all different industries, which is how people can use their social networks to get things done in the real world. 6 months later, she quit her job and TaskRabbit was born. Now, the interesting thing, and the reason why I'm showing you TaskRabbit, is what has happened on the platform. So, first of all, the things that they expected to appear on this marketplaces, the ways that people would think about outsourcing and directly finding what they need, were things like cleaning and picking up supermarket and doing the washing and moving and delivery. But then something happened on a marketplace, and this is really common, is that they started to see really unusual tasks appearing. Now, why am I showing you this example? Well, what you see happening here is how we're living in this really unique moment where we can create a market for things that never had a marketplace before. So people with highly niche needs can now find marketplaces for matching. The second thing that we see happening here is really interesting. It's what I call curated matching, where the role of the company is now this platform that matches people directly with whom they need at exactly the right moment in time. Now, the interesting thing to me is that big brands are recognizing that this is the future of labor. Whether we like it or not, this is the future of how things would likely get done. So this is an interesting example called Wonolo, and it was started, in fact, by Coca-Cola. Now, Coca-Cola recognized that one of the complexities in their job force is daily or hourly tasks, things that they often pay agencies lots of money to source and staff. So they created this platform called Wonolo, where they realized that they could actually outsource things like stocking Coke shelves to their customers. Now, what's happened is they've realized they've actually built a white label platform for all kinds of big consumer brands that want on-staffing in demand. Now, this is really smart, because this is an example of a major brand realizing that they can create a marketplace. They can create a role in a marketplace if they accept that customers, the people we formerly thought of as our clients, as our customers, they no longer play that role. They now are providers. They're not used to just being treated as customers. They can actually provide the goods and services in ways that can create value. Now, why am I showing you this example? Well, what you see happening here is how we're living in this really unique moment where we can create a market for things that never had a marketplace before. So people with highly niche needs can now find marketplaces for matching. The second thing that we see happening here is really interesting. It's what I call curated matching, where the role of the company is now this platform that matches people directly with whom they need at exactly the right moment in time. So people want to know, who am I going to work with? How much will it cost? And when will it get done? And the role of the platform is to set up the technology so that the customer feels like you're reading their mind. You're providing them the exact people that they're looking for in that moment in their lives. So this picture is incredibly important for any industry that has intermediaries, because the role of the intermediary now is different. It's often to continually provide the efficiency for this direct matching and for this trust. So it's a brilliant example of how we're seeing the elimination of gatekeepers. This is actually a quote from Jeff Bezos, and he says, "I see the elimination of gatekeepers everywhere. It's now easier and cheaper than ever to publish your own book, start your own company, and chase your own dream." And he said this in response to the fact that in the UK last year, 12 out of the 100 bestsellers on the Kindle were all self-published. People realized that they could cut out the publishing middleman and actually go direct to market. Now, this has an impact for so many different industries because of two things. The first thing is that people's role is changing, so that they no longer just see themselves as the passive receiver of products and services. And the second thing is that over time, the crowd will create more value than any organization. So over time, these crowd systems will become more powerful than these individual institutions. So let me show you how this is being applied in one way to insurance. There's many different ways, but this is just one way I picked. Now, the reason why I'm showing you a picture of a pug, does anyone own a pug before I talk about pugs? I think pugs are strange dogs. That's just me personally. I think they're ugly, and if you've ever not slept with a pug, but had a pug sleep in your room, I should say, they're like babies. They sniffle and they snuffle. Now, it turns out that pugs are really prone to health issues. And they're also the number 3 dog in terms of dogs that are stolen. So you take health issues and you take theft. Now, insurance terms, that makes them high risk. Now, I actually looked into this. I spoke to pug owners, and they said they're incredibly difficult to insure. You either can't get insurance or you pay this huge premium. Now, this is where this company called Bought by Many is starting to make a play. It basically is discovering people with niche insurance needs and encouraging them to come together to form buying groups in ways that give them clout with insurance companies. Now, the founder of this is a really interesting gentleman. He's a guy called Stephen Mendel. He's very experienced in financial services. And what gave him the idea was actually 2 things. The first was he left his corporate job at Christie's. And at Christie's, he was actually in charge of valuation. So he was working a lot with the insurance companies. And when he left, he couldn't believe how hard it was to get health insurance as an individual. He discovered that his health insurance was 4 times the cost as when it was at Barclays and Christie's. But the thing that struck him was the lack of access, the lack of negotiating power he had with the insurance companies. The second thing that he saw happening was the amount of group buying starting to take place in different sectors. Utilities, so telco and solar power, shopping, Groupons of the world. So he said, why can't we apply this same group crowd power to insurance services? So the way it works is really quite simple. It finds niche insurance needs. Now, the niche insurance needs are found in 2 ways. Sometimes people self-identify. So one of the biggest groups is diabetes sufferers who need travel insurance. The other way that they find insurance groups is really interesting. They look at Google data. So they look at search engine terms. And they look at what people are searching for. So it turns out insuring your child when they play rugby is high up there. And what they look is when people actually don't satisfactorily convert, so when they're not matched with a good product and service. So they allow people to form their own groups, or they identify the groups. They then give them the tools to form a critical mass. So a group has to have 100 people in it before it has buying clout. Now, the interesting thing about these groups is, yes, it can be around a niche need, so things like diabetes sufferers who need health insurance, or your child plays rugby, but what they're now extending into is that they can negotiate home insurance. Because what they're going to the insurance companies and saying is that they have 150 pug lovers all in this group. Go to them, understand their unique insurance needs. So for me, this is really interesting because it's a bit like some of the examples that we've seen. They start in the niches and the edges, and then they expand out. So I believe that the future of this company is that they'll start to form all kinds of insurance groups, and then the insurance companies will just start to bid and make offers. Now, the important thing of this is that Bought by Many is an intermediary. It's just a different type of intermediary that truly understands that to be relevant in the future, it's not a one-on-one relationship. It's how they form these powerful crowds and really act in the voice of the customer in new kinds of ways. So this is a little bit of a challenging quote, but this is by Stephen Mendel, and he is the CEO of Bought by Many. And he says, the insurance industry moves at a glacial pace. It hasn't innovated in a long time because it hasn't needed to change. And it was really interesting when I spoke to Stephen. He said, if you think about big innovations in insurance, you think about direct line. And you think about money supermarkets, so you think about direct buying or aggregation. Yes, they created some disruption. But fundamentally, the product didn't change for the end customer. The way the customer had power didn't change. And that's the disruption that people like Stephen are seeing, is that it's not just about value and price, it's about that feeling of control and empowerment that people are going to expect in all different areas of their lives.